Kia ora, I'm Sasha Borisenko and welcome to Chewing the Facts. In this series, I hope to untangle some of the science, history, assumptions and forces behind fatness in Aotearoa. Could everything we know about weight be wrong, or at least more complicated? In this episode, Enter the Discrimination Void, I'm going to explore the different types of discrimination fat people face every day, their impact, what's being done about it, and what's not being done about it. And just a warning, there's a lot of swearing, which seems fair given the context.
Do you think that fat people, obese people, are discriminated against? Like, would you support a law change as part of the Bill of Rights to make discrimination against fat people, to legislate against it, basically, which is...
No, I think that would be serious because you could also make the same argument for skinny people on one level. And so I think that there are disadvantages in society for people who are overweight or obese, but I don't think we'd legislate to that effect.
That was National Party health spokesperson Shane Reti in 2020. He suggested weight discrimination shouldn't be legislated because the same would have to be done for thin people.
Privilege is the unearned advantage we get from being part of a dominant group whose needs have traditionally been prioritized.
The game is simple. To move into the upper class, all you must do is throw your wadded-up paper into the bin while sitting in your seat. The students in the back of the room immediately piped up saying, "This is unfair." Most of the students in the front made it, and only a few students in the back of the room made it. He concluded by saying, "The closer you were to the recycling bin, the better your odds." This is what privilege looks like.
Reverse sexism, reverse racism, reverse weight discrimination isn't a thing. Sure, any aggression or harm is not okay, but to assume there's a level playing field, it totally undermines the influence of power, who's got it, and who's disadvantaged by it. Shane acknowledged this harm that's been done to the fat community, but it's not deemed worthy enough to be considered legislating against.
Kia ora, I'm Fern. I am what some people call plus size, but I call myself fat. And I have been fat forever. I was born nearly a 10-pound baby. It happened from the womb. As a fat woman, people look at me with disgust when I walk around, with genuine disgust. I don't wear bras. I haven't for a few years now. I wear clothes that make me feel happy rather than what everyone else wants to see me in, and that really upsets and offends people and really disgusts them, old ladies as well.
Hearing Fern say that, it's hard to understand how cruelty towards fat people is not seen as worthy of legislating against. Fern's managed to fend off the abuse hurled at her and her body and has an acute sense of worth. Here's how she did it.
My fatness led me to doing sex work eventually at one point in my life, which is quite shocking for some people. So, yeah.
Why is that?
Because a lot of people assume that unless you look like an 18-year-old fit, slim, white blonde, or something around that bracket. And this is not to say that I believe this, but a lot of people think that you couldn't be a sex worker. But actually, it's people out there want every type of body that exists, including fat bodies. So, I guess people are just shocked because they in their heads think they probably wouldn't pay to fuck a fat person or have sex with a fat person. Yeah. I think doing the sex work definitely has changed the way I perceive and the way I feel about my own body, 100%. It's made me a lot more confident compared to what I used to be. I have ups and downs like anyone does, especially women, because of the way particularly the media and social media tries to make us think that we need to look and be a certain way.
The ingrained fat stigma is profound. A Yale University study in 2011 found nearly half of its respondents would prefer to give up a year of their lives than be fat. 15 to 30% of the 4,000 participants said to varying degrees they'd rather be depressed, become alcoholics, or give up the possibility of having children than to be fat. 5% said they'd rather lose a limb. And 4% said they'd prefer to be blind. What does this say? Fat phobia, or fearing fatness, is alive and well.
You've called women you don't like fat pigs, dogs, slobs, and disgusting animals. Your Twitter account...
Only Rosie O'Donnell. If I were running The View, I'd fire Rosie. I mean, I'd look her right in that fat, ugly face of hers. I'd say, Rosie, you're fired.
Look at that face. Would anyone vote for that? Can you imagine that, the face of our next president?
Probably I did say something like that about Carl. I'm talking about persona. I'm not talking about look. You know, it's amazing. I mentioned food stamps, and that guy who's seriously overweight went crazy. He went crazy.
Even though Fern has personally untangled herself from society's negative attitudes, it doesn't mean she's not privy to discrimination from random people in public places.
The swimming pool, I offend heaps of people when I'm swimming. And because I just wear a one piece, I'm not interested in putting board shorts and T-shirts on over top to be uncomfortable. Like, no, thank you. I'll swim like everyone else does. And people hate that. So get lots of stares at the swimming pool. And like even, I remember the first like one that sticks in my head from being young was when I was like, I don't know, like 15, 16 at the mall. And me and my mates had just gotten like snacks at the food court or whatever. And we were walking around with like a McDonald's cup or whatever, and this woman walked past and was just like, oh, you shouldn't be drinking that. Like, just this old lady, like, excuse me, who the fuck are you? You have no idea what's in this cup, and I'll do whatever I like, you know. And actually at that point in my life, I was like severely, deeply in not a good space in regards to eating disorder life, so which a lot of fat people tend to have eating disorders because we're like, it's forced upon us from like child age. So like those kind of comments in public, like to me as a 15-year-old girl, that was really awful and like sat with me, you know. So there's it used to faze me, but now it doesn't.
The irony is that the busybody who took issue with Fern's drink mightn't know that studies show weight stigma actually leads to weight gain. In fact, weight stigma leads to poor health outcomes. Weight stigma has been linked to sleep disturbance, alcohol use, mental health conditions, suicidality, and disordered eating. It also leads to high blood pressure, inflammation, and cholesterol, and even death. Health issues are compounded by the fact people who face weight discrimination from health practitioners avoid seeking further treatment. I explored these more back in episode 6.
Now with the RDX full stomach reducing plan, you fill your stomach, avoid hunger tantrums, lose excess weight naturally and fast. And safe, pleasant-tasting RDX tablets contain no dangerous drugs, no hormones. So if your doctor has told you to lose weight, get RDX at your drugstore now.
Back to Fern.
The other thing is people think I'm real dumb. Like, it's actually probably one of my favourite things at the moment is how many people just dismiss me because they just look at me and assume that because I'm fat, I'm dumb. Like, fat is dumb, you know, like, oh, Homer Simpson, dumb, fat, on the couch, eating. Like, that's genuinely what people think. Like, that's a fat phobic, like, thing that's stuck in people's minds. And so, like, I'll be involved. I do quite a lot of contract work in different arenas and different industries, some very fat phobic industries, and like I'll go through like working with someone for like 6 months and they won't have even said hello to me, and then they'll find out that I'm someone who's a little bit important actually, and then suddenly they want to be my, you know, they want to be networking with me or in cahoots with me, and it's like, well, hold on a second, when you thought I was just a silly dumb girl who's fat out the back, like you didn't want a bar of me.
In 2008, weight discrimination was one of the most common forms of discrimination reported by men and women. Here's the wild thing. It's totally legal in Aotearoa for health physicians, teachers, co-workers, employers, the government, landlords, bus drivers, you name it, to discriminate against people on the basis of their size.
Well, when many think of discrimination in the workplace, discrimination based on weight may not be the first thing that comes to mind. But a Harvard University study finds while biases on race and gender went down, on weight, they remained steady.
In 2021, an international study found almost 60% of participants in Australia, Canada, France, Germany, the UK, and the US experienced weight stigma. Classmates, doctors, and co-workers were listed as some of the most common sources behind friends and family. Here's one of its authors, Dr. Rebecca Poole. She's a professor at the University of Connecticut.
Yeah, so in the workplace, people absolutely face prejudice and unfair treatment because of their weight. And that can happen in different ways. It can happen at the level of hiring. So we see that people with larger bodies are less likely to be hired than thinner applicants. But we also see this once they're on the job. So we see that they're facing discrimination when it comes to things like their promotion potential, salary compensation, job termination. And they also face stigma and stereotypes from colleagues and coworkers. And so what this shows is that people are essentially vulnerable to weight stigma at really every stage of the employment process, from being hired to being fired.
In a 2008 study, Rebecca Poole found 60% of those who reported weight discrimination didn't get offered jobs in the first place, were passed over for a promotion, or were wrongly fired. This stuff isn't new. There's been 30 years of research looking at how co-workers and managers have perceived fat people as lacking self-discipline, self-control, being lazy, possessing poor work habits, having less competency, skill, and ability than thin people.
I've seen so many articles of
exercise.
The far right obsession with being in shape.
Yeah.
Like it's a bad thing somehow. I don't.
Well, because there's a giant percentage of our population that is really lazy and fat.
Other studies have shown fat people work longer hours and are considered less qualified for leadership positions. University contractor Kylie knows this type of discrimination well.
You go for an interview. For an example, I went for an interview, but to be an assistant, working with young people with disabilities, very overqualified for this job. I went to the interview and she had asked me a few questions, and then she said, well, I need someone that can go up and down a flight of stairs with ease, so I don't think this is going to work for you, but thank you for coming in today. And I'm just like, how do you know whether I can go upstairs or not? Like, seriously, in a lot of interviews, I found that I was qualified for the position, but not right-sized. They would never actually say it, but they talk around it, You get used to hearing code words for things, especially if you are wanting like a customer-facing position. There's a lot of talk about we need a presentable, energetic looking, well-presented person up the front, and you're sort of like, yep. Just say it. I mean, I kind of wish they would just say it. Like, it's quite painful to sit through that sort of thing.
Back home, a Massey University study in 2005 asked 50 HR people to rank fictitious CVs on the suitability for a role. Fat applicants were ranked as having the poorest quality CV, despite no difference in qualifications or experience. Here's Celia McDonald. I met her at her home studio earlier this year. She was preparing for a show she'd written, produced, directed, and was to perform in at Bats Theatre. Her experiences of fat discrimination and trying to get gigs as an actor formed the basis of her play, A Fat Girl's Cry.
I'm particularly passionate about, and it's very personal to me, my weight, size and appearance when it comes to musical theatre, because your body is your job, essentially. It wasn't until some audition rejection and an audition experience that was very unpleasant. I said I was going in for a certain role, and when I said I was going to go for that role, they were like, oh, really? And it was just a very weird reaction.
Was it in relation to your size?
Yes. Yes, because that character specifically has never been played by a plus-size person before, but it would be so interesting if it was. It was mainly about my appearance, because I asked them later on and they were like, oh, yeah, you just didn't fit the look. I was like, great.
Theatre school wasn't much better.
But then when you go into this musical theatre course with all these really gorgeous people and they're all wearing these leotards and showing off their bodies, and you're like, oh. Especially in the morning where they've had a big breakfast or something and they look at themselves in the mirror and they go, oh, I'm so bloated. Oh, my thighs look weird. Oh, I hate wearing a leotard because this, and this. And then I go and stand next to them and I'm like, yeah, but my thighs are bigger than yours. My stomach's bigger than yours. My arms are bigger than yours. And yet you're complaining about them. And you're complaining about them being big because it's so exposed. But then they turn to you and they go, oh, no, you're beautiful. You don't have to worry about that, But you're nice. It's just my arms that aren't particularly nice. And I'm like, so? You're still comparing yourself to someone like me. Or and again, it's that internalized fat phobia, because when you say it, it may not sound to you that it's fat phobic, but to other people, it actually is. It's rude and you're being mean to yourself. But you're not taking into consideration what other people are thinking and what other people may think when they look at you and you hear someone say that. Then you go like, what the hell am I then? Am I Godzilla? I guess I'm an elephant then compared to you.
Discrimination in education settings has a significant impact.
Look, the kids got bosoms! Who's got a wet towel? Come here, you butterball.
Don't make me run! I'm full of chocolate!
A UK study of 15,000 people in 2007 found fat women were half as likely to attend university. A Swedish study in 2006 found fat men had a lower chance of attaining higher education. This was even after adjustments were made for intelligence and parent social economic status. Here's weight stigma professor Rebecca Poole again.
Internalizing stigma is a really important aspect of weight stigma. And what this involves is the process of really being aware of negative societal stereotypes that exist about weight, applying those to oneself, and really engaging in self-blame and self-stigma because of one's weight. And unfortunately, when we think about weight stigma in our broader society, we don't see a lot of active challenging of that weight stigma, right? We see a lot of messages that reinforce the stigma, but we don't see a lot of messages that challenge it. And as a result, it becomes very easy for people to internalize it and to blame themselves and to think, well, I guess I must be responsible. I guess it is my fault and I deserve to be treated this way.
So we've looked at discrimination in health settings in episode 6, and now public spaces, employment and education. There's also goods and services. For actor Celia McDonald, flying on planes causes distress.
I've never liked flying, and I don't think I ever will, and the seats just seem to get smaller and smaller and more narrow, and the leg space isn't enough anymore. And to be honest, I'm right on the edge of, I use all of the seatbelt, so I can't really pull it because otherwise it just squishes me. And so it's just enough to get around my body, but no one really wants to ask for a belt extender because it's looked at as embarrassing. The only time that people think that you need a belt extender is that if you're pregnant or if you have a child sitting on your lap with you. But if you don't, then it's like, oh, well, they must be fat or lazy, or that they're too big. Yeah, but then even if you need a seatbelt extender or not, the seats are still very uncomfortable because of the handrails, and they squish into you and you feel like you're going to spill over the armrests into the next seat, but my brain links them to other things that other people have said from the primary school bullying. You're taking up too much space. Move over, move away. We don't want to be near you. And there's that whole, like, why would anyone want to sit next to me? I'm gross.
This is Calvin. It's not his real name. He wants to remain anonymous, so we've distorted his voice. As a cabin crew member, he's worked at multiple airlines across Australasia for more than 7 years.
An aircraft is a pressure cooker environment. Like, if you think about the journey people take to get onto an aircraft, say, in post-COVID, people have been waiting years to get away. They're extremely stressed. Airfares are extremely expensive. Airports don't have enough staff, so there's long queues. It's extremely stressful. People are going through this wild journey before they even get on the aircraft. So they're stressed by the time they get there. Put that in a metal tube with confined space and a whole lot of stressed people from different demographics who don't know each other. Any issue, whether it be fat phobia as one example, is heightened. So people's emotions are constantly heightened. So in terms of a customer of size, it can be the small thing that flares up someone's frustration that they already have with not getting the seat they wanted. And as soon as they get there and they're like, oh my God, someone's encroaching on my space, they will just blow up and blame it on the airline. And they will not hesitate to take it out on the cabin staff, because we are the only uniformed people where they can do that. And I've seen it time and time again where there's no shame and them doing it in front of the person in full earshot of the person hearing it. If I had to guess, I would say I've observed that probably, over 100 times over the time I've been flying. It's quite a common thing to see people become upset or irate about it.
There have been times where it's been so bad, Calvin's had to kick the person spouting abuse off the plane. Discrimination seems to be rife in the aviation industry. From passengers feeling entitled to make judgments, there's even been claims uniforms of certain airlines are limited to only allow for people under a certain size.
These girls are 21 to 28, stand 5'2 to 5'7", and if they enroll with a few excess pounds, they graduate light enough to fly. A hostess does plenty of knee bends in the narrow aisle of an airplane, and these teeter boards develop balance, important in rough weather, when her nonchalant poise reassures jittery passengers.
In 2017, 2 female flight attendants sued airliner Aeroflot, claiming they'd been shifted to less lucrative flying routes due to their size. The airline told its attendants they couldn't wear uniforms larger than a New Zealand size 16. A Russian court awarded damages, but didn't conclude the policy was discriminatory. The airline said heavier crew members meant it would need to spend more money on fuel. It's a really good example of indirect discrimination, which is harder to prove, and we'll be looking at a bit later. There's also the size of the seats and layouts of aircrafts, which exclude certain body types. Back to Calvin.
I had a passenger mid-flight say to me, I can't feel sensation in my legs. And it was cutting off her circulation. And she was in so much pain around her sides, but she didn't want to say anything. And I just asked her, like, hey, you look so uncomfortable. Can I get you anything? I thought she was a nervous flyer. But we hadn't realized that she had squeezed herself into the seat and she had bruising on both sides of her hips that she was too humiliated to say anything about. And all she said to me was, I can't feel the sensation in my legs. And that's when I connected the dots. So there's often this like shame of people won't ask for something, or they won't ask for an extension belt because they're too embarrassed.
In the context of New Zealand and Australia, seeing as a third of Aotearoa and a quarter of Australia are considered, quote, obese or overweight using the problematic BMI, surely you'd think seats would be designed to accommodate. I put the question to Air New Zealand's media team, which ghosted me on that one.
Now, if you're planning to jet away anytime soon, you might want to ponder this. Would you be comfortable stepping on the scales?
That's what's happening over the next 5 weeks as Air New Zealand asks passengers to weigh in.
That clip was from May, when Air New Zealand asked passengers to step on the scales for a 5-week period. In a statement, Air New Zealand load control specialist Alastair James said the survey was essential to the safe and efficient operation of the aircraft and was a civil aviation requirement. The company weighed everything from luggage to meals, and for crew, cabin bags and customers, the survey helped to determine average weights. The survey was anonymous, voluntary, and the digits weren't visible on the scales, he said. The question is, are the fit-outs of planes getting smaller?
But also we see our aircraft, we call them LOPAs, layout of passenger accommodation. So we get a LOPA every time a new layout comes out, and they have been getting closer together. So the same aircraft types can fit more seats, but the size of the aircraft hasn't changed, for example. So the back of the aircraft, generally the seats are closer together, and then the further forward you go, the further apart the seats become, and they cost more based on the extra legroom that you have at the front. The A330s was a good example. So high-density seating is so popular option for airlines at the moment. It's like something like an average Airbus A330 seats almost 300 passengers, and they've been able to squeeze in almost 400 in a high-density layout, just for profit. And aircraft bathrooms are getting so much smaller. They're almost half the size, the new fit-outs that some manufacturers are making, to what they were when the aircraft was originally delivered with its original cabin layout. But as time's gone on, they're doing it to be able to squeeze in an extra row of seats.
In a statement, a different Air New Zealand spokesperson said the company had no A330 aircrafts in its fleet. It does have the new A321, which has slightly more seats, but that's due to the aircraft being longer. Seat sizes aren't smaller. Airbus, the company behind the design, redesigned the layout of Air New Zealand's planes so bathrooms at the back are slightly narrower. But this isn't unique to Air New Zealand. To say the company discriminated against fat people was unfair, the spokesperson said.
Ensuring our customers are comfortable when flying with us is incredibly important and taken into account right from design phase through to how our crew look after them on board the aircraft.
Jetstar, the other domestic operator in Aotearoa, doesn't operate A330s either. The company declined to comment, but said A321neo LRs are the same size and the seats are slightly larger than previous iterations.
And I think capitalism's just in conflict with our sense of humanity when it comes to aviation. We're trying to make money and squeeze humans into a little metal can. And really, that the rhetoric is that the airlines are pretending to care. There is no genuine care. It's a cold clinical business that needs to make money. So it's becoming harder for fat people.
There's a lot to stomach here. It's bleak, for sure. For now, let's turn to other goods and services.
Hey, guess what? Anything that you buy is either a good or a service. Goods are things people use and can touch, such as books, toys, clothing, food, and even electronics.
But what is a service?
Services are things that are done for you.
Here's Sarah Jane Duff. She's the director and designer of plus-size fashion label Lost and Led Astray.
Because of this whole notion of health, the fat body still gets a bit left behind in the conversations of it being about diversity, because people think that you're unhealthy and lazy and all those ridiculous ideas. So why should there be space for you? You just need to sort yourself out. So it's quite nice, being part of that conversation. I created my shop because I wanted a safe space for people to come to that actually was equipped to making you feel welcome, but also like a few little things like a chair that fits your bum and a changing room that's big enough for your body, things that aren't going to break because of your weight or whatever, just space between my counter and my racks and all that kind of stuff. But also, I guess, so you walk in and you know that the clothes can fit you rather than it's your body's fault that you don't fit the clothes in the shop. It's actually the dresser's fault that it doesn't fit your body. So where it's purpose cut and thoughtfully purpose cut, yeah, there's a different way of pattern cutting, going from the 2D to the 3D for the plus size body, because my body just moves differently and it just is different. It's not bad or worse or good or, there's no we don't need to quantify that. It just is.
When we think about fat discrimination, particularly randos feeling confronted and going out of their way to spout abuse, you have to wonder why. No abuse is okay, of course, but rather than directing energy towards fat people, why aren't we questioning the intention behind the design environment, who it's designed for, and who it's excluding?
The Federal Transit Administration looking at some changes for city buses, all because we weigh more. ABC 15's Mike Pelton shows us what changes could be coming and how many pounds we've put on.
Why are doors 2 metres tall, or booths bound to the floor and at a certain distance? Should we be moving from individual blame to structural accountability to ensure all people don't suffer discrimination? Sarah Jane explains the impact of this exclusion.
It's a lifetime spent as an outsider that you're trying to unwrap and will show that someone's worthy of fashion or worthy of clothing that fits and worthy of spending money on themselves, because especially being New Zealand made, my price point's high. And when you live in this mindset that you need to change your body to be worthy, so therefore, how can you be worthy to spend money on your body as it is? There's lots of little factors that come into how a plus-size woman shops, and it's not easy. They don't like doing it. They shy away from it. And so, why do you spend money on yourself if you hate yourself,
So we've established discrimination in so many aspects of public and private life. What can be done about it? Here's Greg Robbins. He's a Deputy Director at the Office of Human Rights Proceedings.
So the Human Rights Commission is New Zealand's national human rights institution, and every country should have one. But if you're looking to make a complaint of discrimination in Aotearoa, that's where you need to complain to first, under the Human Rights Act. Once you've made your complaint of discrimination to the Commission and it's not resolved, you can then go on to the Human Rights Review Tribunal, which is an independent body, much like a court, which hears complaints of discrimination and the other things which are close to it.
The Commission has received 7 employment complaints over the last 6 years, alleging unlawful discrimination on the basis of weight. Greg says between 2008 and 2011, the Commission was approached 50 times. For context, the Commission receives up to 1,500 complaints a year, so 50 seems pretty small. Designer extraordinaire Sarah Jane offers some insights.
Because you're sort of shamed into the corner, how many fat people truly stand tall? There's not a lot of us that actually stay convicted in the politics of this, because you are so up against everything. And I mean, when you get misdiagnosed by a doctor, there's just so many factors that don't work within our lives because you're fat. It's pretty hard to stay a fat activist. You kind of actually need your allies to change it, to be honest, because how do you to be taken seriously can be really hard in a fat body, and because you're discriminated against as soon as you walk in a room.
Greg from the Office of Human Rights Proceedings told me that's also not to say discrimination isn't happening. It's just not in the public's consciousness. Here he is again.
And so let's talk about the Human Rights Act. So there is no specific weight clause. Why is that?
That's a good question, and I don't know. So you come to the Human Rights Act in 1993, and there are many more grounds, which is great, but they've been added to again over time. And these are the grounds which we all know: sex, race, disability, age, so on and so forth. But, for example, in 2005, we had civil unions come into New Zealand law. And so it was important to put in the Human Rights Act, you can't discriminate against someone because of their civil union status, or for that matter, marital status. In 2019, it was made unlawful under the Act to discriminate against someone because they're affected by family violence. So that was another new ground. 2022, it was clarified that you can't discriminate against someone because they use a disability assist dog, so a bit broader than a guide dog, for example. So there's nothing stopping Parliament from adding weight discrimination or size discrimination to the Act as an explicit ground. It just hasn't happened.
Studies suggest support for anti-discrimination policies and rules are significantly lower when people strongly attribute fatness to personal responsibility or willpower. Remember this clip from last year from Louise Wallace of Real Housewives of Auckland fame?
Need to fix it. But are they feeding us it?
Hey, fundamental, that just tape over people's mouths with gaffer tape.
Oh.
I mean, you know what I mean?
Likewise, when fatness is attributed to factors beyond personal control, like genetics or the changes in the food environment, there's generally been more support for weight-based policy. In fact, a US study by Rebecca Poole and others in 2011 found 65% of men and 81% of women supported weight discrimination laws in the workplace. Back home, there's been no research on the matter. So what do our members of Parliament have to say? Here's former lawyer and former Justice Minister Judith Collins discussing epidemiologist Susie Wiles back in 2021.
Well, I think she's a big fat hypocrite, actually. And I'm sick and tired of listening to her telling everyone else what to do.
Here's ACT's David Seymour.
And I'll tell you something else. You look around Parliament, there's a few people carrying a few more pounds than perhaps they should be. And I think it's healthy for people to have a hobby that helps them lose a bit of weight.
Are you fat-shaming politicians?
Absolutely. We have an obesity crisis in this country, and no one's doing anything about it. Well, I am.
Where is the obesity crisis in Parliament?
Oh, look, I don't think you need to name the names. I think you guys in the media should get out there with your wide-angle lenses and look around.
And former New Zealand Firsts, Winston Peters.
On behalf of the Prime Minister, that's a marvellous question, actually. Because, well, I know something, that member's never seen a shovel. And it shows. I mean, anybody that's done any physical work, they keep that shape all their lives.
Order. I'm first of all going to have the shadow leader.
Throw Fatty out.
Then there's the Labour Party. Former Justice Minister Kitty Allen declined to come on the podcast back in May. She said given this work wasn't a priority on the Justice Work Programme, it would be inappropriate. It doesn't seem quite right to me that our lawmakers only feel it's necessary to comment on stuff that's already active. If that's the case, how does anything ever change? Fast forward to early August, when there was a changing of the guard. New Justice Minister Ginny Anderson declined to come on the podcast and didn't give a reason. It's funny, I'm getting quite comfortable with rejection actually, but I digress. In a statement, she said although weight discrimination isn't in the Human Rights Act, it could extend in some circumstances. She said any review of the Human Rights Act would require significant policy work, which wasn't part of the current government work programme. Other protections could help, such as via the Code of Health and Disability Services Consumer Rights, which provide a general right to be free from discrimination. So what are the some circumstances the Justice Minister was referring to? Here's where it gets fraught. I'll hand you over to Greg Robbins from the Office of Human Rights Proceedings again.
First thing you need to do under the current law is satisfy first the Commission and then the Human Rights Review Tribunal that your complaint falls under the Human Rights Act. And as I say, there's no ground called weight discrimination or size discrimination, so you'd need to fit it under one of the existing grounds. And the ground which is closest, and these aren't my words, but these are the words of the Act, is disability. And that might include physical disability or impairment, or any other abnormality of anatomical structure or function. So you'd need to try and fit your complaint within one of those grounds first. Sure, so the Act is pretty broad in that it covers a lot of areas of public and private life.
Greg's hesitation stems from tension from both the fat and disability communities. For example, in a paper by fat studies scholar, the late Dr. Kat Porzay, she said,
"Fat people, though, often reject the label of being disabled for a multitude of reasons, including the conceptualisation of disability as being synonymous with severe physical impairments or limitations, the belief that fatness is mutable, and the further stigmatisation they believe it may bestow."
Okay, now I've prepared an agenda for our organization, what we want from the community as fat people with pride.
Regardless, it shouldn't be one or the other, right? Each community is deserving of equal attention and protection. So what's all the fuss about? Do we actually need a separate category in the Human Rights Act? Here's Greg again.
Two things come to mind. One, it gives someone a legal recourse. So it allows them to take a claim and to stand up for their rights in that sense. So if they have been treated unfairly, then it allows them to go to the tribunal and seek a declaration, seek an order remedying that harm, and potentially seek a sum of damages. The other thing, simply by including a ground of discrimination in the Human Rights Act, it provides more visibility to the issue as well. So it enables them to say, hey, look, these are my rights, I'm recognised by the law, and they can build on that and recognise that or feel valued that the law recognises them.
Okay, so it does shape public opinion in some senses.
I'd say, yeah, it does help shape the public discourse.
So far, San Francisco, Washington State, and Michigan in the US, Victoria in Australia, and Reykjavik in Iceland are among the few jurisdictions that prohibit size discrimination. In May this year, New York City Mayor Eric Adams signed an ordinance banning discrimination on the grounds of weight and height.
New York City Mayor Eric Adams today signed a bill that prohibits height and weight from being discriminated against in employment, housing, and access to public accommodations. Adams says the new law will help level the playing field for all New Yorkers.
And it shouldn't matter how tall you are or how much you weigh. When you're looking for a job and you're out on our town or you're trying to get some form of accommodation or apartment to rent, you should not be treated differently. I think this is the right thing to do. We're going to continue to talk about our progressive health agenda. And science has shown that body type is not a connection to if you're healthy or unhealthy. And I think that's a misnomer that we are really dispelling.
There's also an issue where there is a significant difference between direct and indirect discrimination, and the latter is harder to prove. Here's Otago University Law Associate Professor Salani Mize.
So direct discrimination is when the person treats people differently. You treat obese people differently from people that are not obese. And so, for example, if you choose not to hire someone because you think they're unattractive because of their weight, that would be direct discrimination. Indirect discrimination, on the other hand, focuses on a facially neutral characteristic. For example, if the employer said, if you're going to work for this burger joint, you have to wear our branded uniform, And our uniforms only come up to size 16. We don't have bigger uniforms. Then they would say, therefore, we're not going to interview anyone large for the job because we couldn't provide them with a uniform. And probably when it comes to something about just providing uniforms, because if it's a large outfit, they're buying and replacing uniforms on a regular basis, and it's not a very satisfying requirement when it comes to good reason, because it seems to be something they could just simply order some more in bigger sizes. But that's an example of how indirect discrimination would work.
But it's very, very difficult to prove.
Proof is part of the reason we have very, very few successful discrimination cases in New Zealand. I think that obesity should be a prohibited ground of discrimination, but that doesn't mean that I think overnight all discrimination will cease. You saw it when discrimination against women was banned in the 70s and 80s. And a lot of people would say things, I'm not allowed to say this, but of course we want a man for the job or something. It took quite a period of time before it really was well respected and enforced by employers. But a lot of times you don't know what's in a person's head. They turn you down for the job. They've got your CV in front of them. Maybe in reality, it has to do with the person's size. But if they say, well, they don't have the right amount of experience, or they didn't interview well, like wouldn't be personable with the public, they would probably get away with that. An interesting development in music is that a lot of orchestras now have blind auditions. They put the person auditioning for a spot in the orchestra behind a screen, so you can't see their race and you can't see their gender. And when they did this, more women were hired. That relates to sex discrimination, but I guess conceivably the same thing could happen with obesity. If people were hired based on their CVs or a telephone interview where the employer couldn't see the person's size, I think it's more likely that you could be sure obesity didn't play a role.
So there are quite a few issues here. 1, you've got a silent population. 2, size discrimination isn't recognised. And 3, even if it were, it's hard to prove. Running throughout all of this are factually incorrect belief systems that blame individuals for their personal choices, which I've explored heaps in episodes 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and 6. There's also this thing where to deny discrimination exists, it means oppression bubbles under the surface. I'll leave you with weight stigma professor Rebecca Poole, who argues weight bias is the last socially acceptable form of discrimination.
I think that part of the challenge is that weight bias, weight-based stereotypes, these have become ingrained in our society. Many of these biases are implicit and they become automatic. So whether it's on social media or entertainment media, whether it's in everyday interactions, it really has to start with our individual personal awareness. And we can start by asking ourselves, what assumptions do I make about people based on their body size? What stereotypes do I have? Where do these come from? And as we start to answer those questions, we need to challenge our assumptions. So asking ourselves, what evidence can I see in the world around me of people who challenge these stereotypes? And there are many examples of people with larger body sizes who do not conform to negative stereotypes. So people who are active and successful and ambitious and hardworking and talented and living healthy lifestyles. And so part of that is really challenging those assumptions and those ingrained attitudes and beliefs. But then we also need to step up and say something when we observe weight bias around us, because if we say nothing, then we just contribute to the problem. So, pointing out instances of weight bias when they occur and calling those out and taking the opportunity to really educate others and explain why this is harmful. And we can all do this in our daily lives. And it doesn't need to be combative. It can really come from a place of modeling and expressing support and respect and acceptance of people of all body sizes.
I'm Sasha Borisenko, and that was episode 7 of Chewing the Facts. It was written, directed and produced by me. Executive producer was Teresa Cowie from Connect Content. Post-production and sound design was by Oliver Devlin. Theme music by Thomas Lambert, with special thanks to Andrew Laxon, Ethan Sills and many more. Follow Chewing the Facts on iHeartRadio or wherever you get your podcasts. We're also on TikTok and Insta at Chewing the Facts NZ. For show notes and research, check out chewingthefacts.com. New episodes are out every Sunday. This podcast was made in collaboration with the New Zealand Herald, with support by New Zealand On Air. In the next episode, I'll be exploring the magical world of marketing and advertising. How do we know what's really in our food? And why am I drawn to those 2-for-1 specials at the checkout?
And I'm very much susceptible to marketing. And if there was anything that said healthy on it, I didn't have the time to read the actual ingredient label. And some of the labels are actually unreadable. So I think it's actually difficult to access good nutritional information. You do rely on some of the marketing. I mean, who would have thought that a yogurt could possibly have so much added sugar?
See ya!